Let me first begin by sharing how wonderful it is to be together for this Clergy-Laity Assembly after our COVID hiatus. It was in February 2020 that we last gathered here at the ranch. And just a few weeks later, our whole world shifted. The church, as did so many aspects of our society, pivoted quickly to adapt, and while it was a painful time to be apart, I believe it also strengthened us, opened our eyes and hearts to new ways of serving our faithful, and it truly made us appreciate our time together. We just begin our assembly, and we'll spend today and tomorrow together in prayer and reflection, celebration and deliberation and fellowship. We also will be joined by some special guests. One of them is Archon George Kantonis, president of Hellenic College, Holy Cross Greek Orthodox School of Theology in Brookline, Massachusetts, who is going to be addressing us shortly. We also welcome Katrina Bitar from YES, which stands for Youth Equipped to Serve, who will offer a most enlightening presentation for us this afternoon and tomorrow. I would like also to acknowledge the presence and participation of Ms. Ria Ballas, who is the Assistant Director of Youth Safety at our Archdiocese. She will have some valuable information to share with all of us on this important topic. I have many partners in my ministry, including each one of you, for which I am profoundly grateful. I especially would like to acknowledge the Vice President of our Metropolis Council, Archon Isidros Garifalakis, who accepted to serve in this capacity last fall. Not a day goes by that he does not give attention to his metropolis. Mind you, he is an active participant of more than one parishes, plus his own work, plus his own family. And I wish to publicly thank him for his leadership and stewardship. For those of you that have attended the Clergy-Laity Assembly in the past, you will recall the Archon Fannis Economidis served for many years as a vice chair of our Metropolis Council. As he now takes time to focus on the restoration of his health, I would be remiss if I did not go on the record to acknowledge his more than 3 decades of service, and how his vision and commitment to growing this metropolis are still evident in our ongoing work and ministry. Thank you. In the Gospel of Gospel of Matthew, we read, "You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do they light a lamp and put it under the bushel, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." It is from this verse we derive the theme of this year's assembly, "Let Your Light Shine," which connects us so many aspects of our work as a metropolis. This particular Clergy-Laity Assembly is focusing on the ministries of this metropolis and the work that they have done amongst you. We are 100 years old. When the Archdiocese was first established in 1922, There were 3 additional districts named, including San Francisco in 1923. It was this light that led the way for the growth and the development of what would become the diocese and eventually the metropolis of San Francisco. You come from somewhere, and there is a need to understand where we're coming from. For 100 years, the light of Christ has shone brightly as a demonstration of our faith and our commitment to good works. The 2 poles that always Christian faith counted upon for their success amongst the people. In those early days, there were but a handful of parishes. Now we cover 7 states with 67 parishes, 3 monasteries, with tens of thousands of people connected to our faith, serving their local communities and placing the Greek Orthodox Church on the map through outreach, service, the cultural events, and many, many more. So why I'm talking to you about this trip down the memory lane? It is because it is important to remember where we are coming from, what we are, and where we're going. Sometimes in this journey that all of us as Christians, especially Orthodox Christians, have begun from our time of birth to our time of departure, we need to remember every so often to take a stock, to stop for a moment, and to see what we're doing. We give thanks to those people, Clergy-Laity, who had the vision to establish our parishes so many decades ago. We did not arrive here out of nowhere. This is a significant year for our metropolis as we celebrate our centennial, marking 100 years of Orthodoxy in the Western United States. We have been blessed with the opportunity to build upon this foundation, the foundation of our forefathers and foremothers, a foundation still very solid in many ways, and to explore new opportunities, yet to hold fast to our faith and our traditions, not being swayed by trends of society, while yet being mindful that we are in the world and must be responsive to the needs of our faithful based on what they are experiencing in this present day. I gather that Katrina, our main speaker for this assembly, will touch upon many of these themes. But I want us to also, in the ledger, in the side, make these notes for you and for me, that our mission is not simply to do the things that we know how to do, but to have experimental, not in a literal or secular sense, but experimental in a spiritual sense, ways to do the work of God. Now I'm entering my 19th year as a bishop here in the West Coast. At the time of my enthronement, I made a commitment to building up ministries for our clergy, parishes, and faithful. We can be proud of our beautiful church structures, but we must also be mindful in offering substantive support for our young people, families, those who are ill or broken, those who are grieving or the elderly, so that our focus is always on doing the work of the Lord. With the help of God and through the support of dedicated clergy and committed stewards like you, we're continuing on this path by following the light of Christ and illuminating even the darkest corners of our world. This evening we will hear from each of our ministry leaders and have the opportunity to interact with them on our courtyard in the ministry pavilion if you have not done it yet. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is the work in the trenches, as we call it. Yes, our liturgical life is paramount to everything we do. We begin with the glorification of God, and we end with thankfulness to Him in the liturgical sense every single day of our lives. But once we leave the church and enter the world, we have both the opportunity and the obligation to bring the church to life within our society through our actions, through outreach, through philanthropy, and through our ministries. In this way, we also set an example for others, especially our youth, to emulate. If parents, and I think this is less and less the praxis, but it still is. If parents drop off their children at church, what message does this teach them? How will the children learn to pray if this is not practiced at home? How can we inspire the next generation of faithful believers? Are we walking by faith or by sight? Of course, it is easier to look at the road ahead and see what obstacles might be there and how we can maneuver around them. But by walking by faith, we're learning to trust God and to submit to His will for our lives. In other words, let the control into the hands of God. We are and doing, engaging the youth in parish life, many things. But really substantively, how is the youth makes any difference in the leadership positions in the communities? What leadership opportunities are being cultivated for them to deepen their connection to the church? What are we doing to nurture their souls and plant their faith deep within their hearts? How can we take our extra faith and apply it to the modern world? These questions cannot be answered without deep thought and understanding, along with prayer and patience. The Old Testament, we read from the book of prophet Jeremiah, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." These words assure us of God's love and the freedom He has given us to make choices. Our faith exemplifies that freedom by loving God and how His love heals human nature and transforms our lives. These are wonderful words together, but they become very stilted if they remain wonderful and nice words. The action is the part that we have difficulty sometimes. The Archbishop said about us basking in the light of the Paschal season, which we do, with each of us representing the light of Christ. In our broken world, there are forces who are trying to extinguish the light of Christ every day, but this is where we, and I underline the we, individually and as parishes, must stand firm in our faith and spread the message of the gospel, caring for a broken humanity by bringing this light to the end of the world, as did the apostles on the day of Pentecost. We have a host of examples and aids to do so. All the saints throughout the centuries, old saints and new saints. Let us be mindful of those examples that they are around us in a continuous basis. Let us be sensitive to the miracles that are taking place on a daily basis because of the Holy Spirit through these saints. This morning in the small Orthros that we did in the monastery, I was looking at the Synaxarion, and Gerontissa and the sisters were commemorating someone that I did not see in the Synaxarion. He was a new martyr, a recent person who has become sanctified. And out of curiosity, I read a little bit more further about him. And he was he was sewing clothes. I don't know how do you say it in English. Raftis. Tailor, excuse me. He was the tailor, and some Turk walked into his shop, and they had a little bit argument about the money that he has to spend. And that became almost an argument that dragged him to the local mufti and asked him either he's going to give up his faith or he's going to be beheaded. And the simple tailor said to him, I'm sorry, there's no chance here that I will say to my Lord, I'm divorcing you from my life. Why I'm saying this? Because these are simple things, but they're events that people did in their lives, became saints, not because they were virtuous to the point that they were not walking upon this earth, they were floating somehow, because that's the way we understand the saints to be. The saints are very much are, were, and they will be, like you and I. Witnessing the gospel is something that comes to us when we have left our ego out of the equation and have entered power of the love that God and Christ have in our hearts. That's the way this past 100 years the churches in the West were created, by simple people, not educated, both clergy and laity. They were workers, they were laborers, they were dishwashers. And the priests, their education was very simple. Many of our parishes that we're celebrating today, like Holy Trinity in San Francisco, Annunciation in Sacramento, Ascension Cathedral in Oakland, St. Sophia Cathedral in Los Angeles, the Annunciation Cathedral in San Francisco, and St. Demetrius in Seattle, all of which have surpassed the 100th year anniversaries. They are wonders and they are signposts of why the Greek Orthodoxy thrives. It's because of these simple people, yet very profound faiths. The West Coast had a strong presence of Orthodoxy in those early years, which is maintained today by all of you and your parishes. To my amazement, from a pleasure point of view, actually very grateful, my younger brothers continue to that tradition of an excellent ministry to the faithful. And the elder ones, they're good mentors. The people who settled in the new areas and planted churches, they did not have some very famous people to do so. They were simple people. Now, 100 years later, we find our landscape dotted with parishes throughout our 7-state region. We have newer communities like Salem and Roseburg in Oregon and Lake Havasu in Arizona. We have parishes in Alaska and Hawaii. The 1.2 million square miles of land and water that comprise our metropolis may be distant geographically, but it is united by our common faith and by the Eucharist, which brings us together in remembrance of Christ's sacrifice upon the cross and the gift of salvation we have been given through his life-giving resurrection. My beloved brothers and sisters in the Lord, as we reflect back on what has been accomplished these past 100 years, we owe a huge debt of gratitude to our forebearers for struggled and sacrificed to start those first parishes. Now we have the opportunity, actually the gift, to look forward and to see what we can do to keep the Greek Orthodox Church on the map, not in the literal sense, but to elevate its visibility as the relevant church that is changing lives, improving our world, and positively impacting the next 100 years and beyond. This is what brings us back to the theme of this Clergy-Laity Assembly, let your light shine. My beloved brothers and sisters in the Lord, this is how we cultivate and hand over a legacy for the next generation. And I see, with a hopeful eye, quite a few younger generation in our midst, and I thank God for that. In the Epistle of James, we read, "You have faith, and I have works. Show me your faith without your works, and I will show you my faith by my works." For you who want to read it again, it's James 2:18. When we see someone homeless or hungry or cold and tired, when we see the brokenness of humanity, we have the duty to carry the light of Christ into society and bring them some hope. I see some faces here that they do that exactly, and I want to thank them for doing that. Hopefully, when we leave this sacred space, by tomorrow night, we're going to go back to our parishes with that light that shines, the light of resurrection, that light that gives us the hope of our own personal salvation and the salvation of the world. When we choose worldly pursuits, climbing the corporate ladder, buying extravagant things, or storing up for ourselves material possessions, we fill up our minds and hearts with temporal pleasures. There is no space for the Lord to reside in us. Again, in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus speaks directly about this when he says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." When we pick and choose the convenient aspects of our faith and only adhere to those tenets that do not challenge us spiritually, the bright light of Christ flickers and the wind blows it out. We are called to be Orthodox Christians each and every day of our lives. Is it a hard road? Yes, it is. But it is only the only road for our lives. Think back to the Garden of Eden. The temptation was too great, and it was easy to eat the fruit from the tree. But what did it change for Adam and Eve, and by extension for all of us? Everything. This is why our commitment to ministry development is so important. This is how we empower people in our faith and our journey along with them to salvation. The ministries in our metropolis are not selected randomly. Rather, they are carefully planned and implemented so that we can effectively provide for the spiritual and emotional and educational, social and cultural edification of all those that we serve. During our deliberations tomorrow, we will review and approve the metropolis budget. It is probably the least favorite part of our work, but it is necessary. But the positive outcome of that discussion shifts our focus not on how we are spending the money, but rather how we are investing the money. That is where the work of our ministries comes in, and where we can bring to life our faith and apply it to the world in which we live. So I challenge each of you also to think about this when looking at your parish budgets. I know how these conversations go. It costs too much for electricity, this much for landscaping, this much for repairs, this much for insurance, and so on. But we do not have to look upon this as burdens. Rather, we need to look upon this as part of the investment we are making. We need to continue to make ministry a priority as a metropolis, as parishes, and through our own involvement in our communities. The COVID period gave us the opportunity to translate that a little bit more amongst us by those famous or infamous Zoom meetings. They gave us the opportunity to tease out, because we had plenty of time in our hands, because we did not do the regular stuff. So that forced us to look what we do as Orthodox Christians, as treasurers of the parish, as presidents of the community, as priests in distress. Whatever it was an access to each other that is totally very valuable at this point. Those were the moments that I hope and pray you will remember, and you will have to go back again to it and to receive the assistance that you need. We have taken that attitude as a metropolis through the leadership of our Metropolis Council. I have challenged the members of the Metropolis Council, and they accepted this challenge to do more. Look at the ministry leadership we have in our metropolis, some of the best and brightest who are keeping the light of Christ alive each and every day through the brightest and darkest moments. It is this light that will lead us to salvation, and it is this light that will draw more people to Christ. We must also remember, just as the Eucharist connects us to Christ, the light also connects us to the Orthodox Christians throughout this country and beyond. Our sacred ministry, and shared one with our beloved Archdiocese, is yet another opportunity to let your light shine, for it is this cooperation and collaboration that keeps us faith firmly planted in the rich soil of this great nation. Our archdiocesan ministries, through the leadership of Archbishop Elpidophoros, provide a guidepost for our work and for the enrichment of our congregations. And though many have tried for centuries to extinguish the light of Christ at our ecumenical patriarchate in Constantinople, we remain strong and unified in our resolve to keep this light burning, to retain our presence in our ancestral lands, and to protect the sea of worldwide Orthodox Christianity. This is more than a duty. It is a sacred obligation. My brothers and sisters in the Lord, thank you for this opportunity to share my thoughts on this year's Clergy-Laity Assembly and to expand on our theme, Let Your Light Shine. Without a doubt, seeing your beloved faces, It is for me the greatest reward that I can ever receive, not only this day, but for many days to come, to see you again after all this time being absent from each other. As we work together over the next day or so, let us strive to be the light, to share the light, and to protect that light so that it is never extinguished, but always glorifies the risen Christ. May the risen Lord be always with you and your families and your ministries. Christ is risen. God bless you.